A congresswoman just asked Jeffrey Epstein's survivors to stand in a congressional hearing, and they stood. And then she asked them to raise their hands if the Department of Justice still hasn't met with them. And every single survivor raised their hand. And then this congresswoman turned to Attorney General Pam Bondi and asked her to turn around and apologize to the survivors standing right behind her for what the Department of Justice has done to them. And Bondi refused. She tried to deflect to Merrick Garland. She tried to make it about the previous administration. And the congresswoman cut her off and said, "This is not about anybody that came before you. This is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you, waiting for you to turn to them and apologize." And Bondi still wouldn't do it. While Republican members yelled that the congresswoman was doing theatrics and accused her of getting in the gutter, Bondi sat there and refused to turn around and face the women her department had violated. So this week, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from Washington confronted Attorney General Pam Bondi about the catastrophic release of Epstein files that exposed survivors' identities while protecting powerful predators. Take a look at this and I'll give you my breakdown at the end.
Questions recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Attorney General Bondi, right here. We are joined in this room by some of the thousands of survivors from Jeffrey Epstein's horrific sex trafficking ring. They have shown such incredible courage in speaking out, in demanding accountability to bring the predators and pedophiles to justice. The Epstein Files Transparency Act required your Department of Justice to disclose the perpetrators connected with Epstein's criminal activities and to redact the information of survivors to protect their identities. Let me show you what actually happened. First, in violation of the law, your department has shown a pattern of redacting the names of powerful predators. Here behind me is one example of an email from Epstein to a man whose name was redacted. The email reads, quote, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." Only after members of Congress demanded that we see the unredacted files did the world learn the name of this individual, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the chairman and CEO of a company that had financial ties to President Trump's business and personal ties to Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon. Second, the survivors were not similarly protected, also in violation of the law. Here is another email titled Epstein Victim List. We have blurred the names of the survivors for their protection, but your Department of Justice initially released this list of 32 survivors' names with only one name redacted, along with numerous files that disclose not only the names, the emails, and the addresses of survivors, but also nude photographs and even the identities of Jane Does who had been protected for decades until your department released their names. Survivors are now telling us that their families are finding out for the first time that they were trafficked by Epstein. In their words, quote, "This release does not provide closure. It feels like a deliberate attempt to intimidate survivors, punish those who came forward, and reinforce the same culture of secrecy that allowed Epstein's crimes to continue for decades." To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand. Attorney General Bondi, you apologized to the survivors in your opening statement for what they went through at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?
Congresswoman, you set before
Merrick Garland sat in this chair twice.
Attorney General
Twice.
Bondi,
No, can I finish my answer?
No, I'm going to reclaim my time because I asked you a specific question
Attorney General
that I
can
would
respond to your
like
question.
you to answer, which is, will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions, the witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer. The Attorney General can
That's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she doesn't
It is
like the
my
answer.
time.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't
a
she ask
question.
Merrick Garland this?
I am
Twice,
reclaiming
when he
my
sat in
time,
my
and
chair.
when I
will
reclaim my
continue to
time,
answer.
it is
Mr. Chairman, the
my
gentlelady's
time.
reclaimed
I'm
her
not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
The time belongs to the time belongs to the gentlelady. The gentlelady has 17 seconds.
Thank you. You're not going to answer this question, so let me just
Chairman,
say
I'll
this.
direct it to
What a
you.
massive
No, I'm
cover-up.
answering a
Mr.
question.
Chairman, will you
Chairman.
restore her time? The witness is
I'm not going to get
interrupting.
in the gutter with this woman.
Stop the
She's
time
doing theatrics.
and let me have my
The
time.
gentlelady from Washington controls the time. The gentlelady has 17 seconds. You can proceed with your final
Thank you.
17 seconds.
What a massive cover-up this has been and continues to be. Donald Trump made the release of the Epstein files the center of his political campaign because he thought it would benefit him. Then you got into office, Attorney General, claimed to have a client list, only
Regular
to
order.
then say that there was no list. Your deputy, Todd Blanche, met alone with Ghislaine Maxwell and transferred her to a minimum security prison. And now you continue the cover-up, and I wish that you would turn around to the survivors who are standing right behind you and on a human level
Chairman,
apologize
The chair now
to them
recognizes the chair.
on what you have done.
Time of the gentlelady
yield
expired.
back.
The gentlelady, you have no time to yield back.
Theatrics.
We appreciate that. We appreciate the thought. And I would argue the central issue in the last election, the presidential election, was securing the border. The gentleman from Arizona who knows something.
All right, let's talk about what you just watched, because that was one of the most powerful confrontations I've ever seen in a congressional hearing. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal just exposed exactly how the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi violated federal law to protect Trump's associates while throwing Epstein survivors to the wolves. And when given the chance to apologize to the survivors standing right behind her, Bondi refused. Let me walk you through what Jayapal exposed, because this is a scandal that should bring down everyone involved. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. That law required the Department of Justice to do two things. First, disclose the names of perpetrators connected with Epstein's criminal activities. Second, redact the information of survivors to protect their identities. Those were the legal requirements. Disclose perpetrators, protect survivors. And the Department of Justice did the exact opposite. They protected perpetrators and exposed survivors. Jayapal showed two specific examples. First, she displayed an email from Jeffrey Epstein to a man whose name was redacted by the DOJ. And that email said, "Where are you? Are you okay? I love the torture video." Read that again. I love the torture video. That's an email from Jeffrey Epstein to someone discussing a torture video, and the Department of Justice redacted that person's name. They protected his identity, and only after members of Congress demanded to see the unredacted files did the world learn who it was. Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the chairman and CEO of a company that had financial ties to President Trump's business and personal ties to Trump advisor Steve Bannon. So the DOJ protected a man with Trump connections who was emailing Jeffrey Epstein about torture videos. That's who they decided deserved privacy protection, not the survivors. The guy talking about torture videos with a pedophile. And then Jayapal showed the second violation. She displayed an email titled Epstein Victim List, and she said the DOJ released this list of 32 survivors' names with only one name redacted. 32 survivors. One redaction. The DOJ exposed 31 women who had been trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein, but it gets worse. Jayapal said the DOJ didn't just release names. They released emails. They released addresses. They released nude photographs of survivors. They released the identities of Jane Does who had been protected for decades until the DOJ exposed them. Think about what that means. These women went to the FBI. They cooperated with investigators. They testified about being trafficked and abused as minors. And in exchange for their cooperation, they were promised anonymity. They were told their identities would be protected. Some of them were designated as Jane Does in court proceedings specifically to shield them from public exposure. And then Pam Bondi's Department of Justice released their names, their emails, their addresses, and nude photographs. Survivors are now telling Congress that their families are finding out for the first time that they were trafficked by Epstein. Their families, people who didn't know. And now they know because the Department of Justice violated federal law and exposed them. Jayapal read a quote from survivors. "This release does not provide closure. It feels like a deliberate attempt to intimidate survivors, punish those who came forward, and reinforce the same culture of secrecy that allowed Epstein's crimes to continue for decades." A deliberate attempt to intimidate survivors. That's what the survivors believe this is. Not an accident, not a mistake. A deliberate attempt to punish them for cooperating with investigators and speaking out. And then Jayapal did something I've never seen in a congressional hearing. She asked the survivors in the room to stand, and they stood. Women who were trafficked as children by Jeffrey Epstein stood up in a congressional hearing, while the Attorney General of the United States sat 10 feet away. And then Jayapal asked them, "If you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice, please raise your hand." And every single survivor raised their hand. Every single one. They're standing in a congressional hearing. The Attorney General is sitting right there. And not one of them has been contacted by the Department of Justice to explain why their identities were exposed in violation of federal law. And then Jayapal turned to Pam Bondi and said, "You apologize to the survivors in your opening statement for what they went through at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?" That's the question. Will you turn around and apologize to the survivors standing behind you? And Bondi started to answer, "Congresswoman, you sat before Merrick Garland, sat in this chair twice." And Jayapal cut her off. "Attorney General, finish my answer. No, I'm going to reclaim my time because I asked you a specific question, which is, will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done." And Bondi still wouldn't do it. She tried to deflect. She tried to make it about Merrick Garland. And a Republican member, I believe the chairman, interrupted and said, "Members get to ask the questions. The witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer." But Jayapal pushed back, "That's not accurate, Mr. Chairman. I am reclaiming my time." And then you can hear a male voice in the background saying, "Get in the gutter for her theatrics." Another voice said, "She's doing theatrics." Theatrics. That's what Republican members called it when a congresswoman asked the Attorney General to apologize to survivors of child sex trafficking for exposing their identities in violation of federal law. Standing with survivors and demanding accountability is theatrics. Asking the Attorney General to turn around and face the women her department violated is getting in the gutter. But Jayapal didn't back down. She said, "What a massive cover-up this has been and continues to be. Donald Trump made the release of the Epstein files the center of his political campaign because he thought it would benefit him. Then you got into office, Attorney General, claimed to have a client list, and then said that there was no list. Your deputy Todd Blanche met alone with Maxwell in a minimum security prison, and now you continue the cover-up." Let's talk about what that means. Trump campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. He said he would expose everyone. He said there was a client list. He said the American people deserve to know the truth. And then he appointed Pam Bondi as Attorney General. And what did Bondi do? She claimed there was a client list. Then she said there was no client list. She sent her deputy to meet alone with Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. And then she oversaw the release of files that protected Trump's associates while exposing survivors. Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the guy emailing Epstein about torture videos, has financial ties to Trump, so his name got redacted. But 31 survivors who cooperated with investigators, their names, emails, addresses, and nude photos got released. That's not transparency. That's selective disclosure designed to protect Trump's circle while punishing survivors for speaking out, and when confronted with it, Bondi won't even turn around and apologize to the survivors standing right behind her. Jayapal's final line before her time expired was, "You continue the cover-up," and she was cut off mid-sentence by the chairman saying her time had expired. But she'd already made her point. This is a cover-up. The Department of Justice is protecting perpetrators and punishing survivors, and the Attorney General won't take responsibility for it. Think about what happened in that room. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring traveled to Washington to attend a congressional hearing. They stood up when asked. They raised their hands when asked if the DOJ had contacted them, and every single one of them raised their hand because not one has been contacted. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, sat there and refused to turn around and face them. She refused to apologize. She refused to take responsibility. She tried to blame Merrick Garland, and when Jayapal pressed her, Republican members accused Jayapal of theatrics. This is how powerful men and the people who protect them operate. They violate the law. They expose survivors. They protect predators. And when confronted, they deflect. They blame someone else, and they accuse their critics of being dramatic. But Congresswoman Jayapal didn't let her get away with it. She made Bondi sit there while survivors stood behind her. She made the record clear that every survivor raised their hand. She made it clear that the DOJ violated federal law, and she made it clear that this is a cover-up. Like, subscribe, and share this everywhere. Because what you just watched is the Attorney General of the United States refusing to apologize to survivors of child sex trafficking for exposing their identities while protecting men with ties to Donald Trump. And that should be front-page news.